AITA for freezing my dad's estate after discovering my initials were forged on a waiver? I'm Ashley, 32, and Robert's oldest daughter. In my family, that always meant I was the one expected to remember the hospital parking validation, the medication schedule, and which kitchen drawer Dad kept the property tax notices in. My mother, Carol, and my younger sister, Brooke, somehow turned all of that into a story where I was difficult, cold, and only interested in money. For a while, I let it slide because grief makes people strange. Then I realized grief was not the reason they needed my signature so badly. Dad had been sick for a little over a year before he died. I'm not going to pretend I was the only person who cared about him. Mom sat with him plenty. Brooke visited. Other relatives called. But I was there for the parts that did not photograph well. I was the person the hospital called when a form was incomplete. I picked up compression socks, wound supplies, and medication refills. I spent hours on hold with his insurance company while Dad slept in a recliner with the television turned low. When a home care company threatened to stop deliveries over a balance nobody understood, I paid it and argued about reimbursement later. There usually was no later. Dad hated asking for help. He would tap the stack of envelopes beside his chair and say, "I'll get to those tomorrow." Tomorrow usually meant me sorting them after he fell asleep. Mom would call me in a low voice from the laundry room. "Can you cover the utility catch-up?" "How much?" $8.12. "Why is it that high?" "Your father missed 2 payments. Just do it for now." Then came the part she always added. "Please don't mention it to Brooke. She'll spiral." The first few times I accepted that explanation. Brooke had always been treated like bad news might shatter her. If Dad needed a ride at 6 a.m., Mom called me because Brooke was not a morning person. If the pharmacy had a problem, I handled it because Brooke got anxious on the phone. If a bill was overdue, I paid it because Brooke was saving for her future. I apparently did not have a future that needed saving for. One night after I paid a hospital balance of $1,460, I texted Mom, "So I'm useful as long as nobody knows I helped?" She replied, "Don't start. I'm exhausted." 20 minutes later, she sent a heart emoji and wrote, "You saved us with that payment." Seriously. A week after that, Uncle Ray told me Mom was worried I was getting weird about Dad's finances. That was how she operated. Private gratitude. Public suspicion. I should have corrected it then. I didn't. I told myself I was choosing dignity. The truth was I hated conflict and I had spent most of my life believing that if I stayed calm long enough, facts would eventually speak for themselves. Facts do not speak for themselves when somebody else controls the room. Brooke was 29 and had always been the emotional center of our family. If she cried, everyone stopped. If I got angry, everyone discussed my tone. During Dad's illness, Brooke posted long messages about holding the family together. She took pictures of their hands clasped together, pictures of coffee cups in hospital rooms, pictures of the sunset outside his window. People commented that she was an amazing daughter. I was usually in the parking garage trying to get the machine to accept a validation sticker. Once, I arrived at Dad's house after a pharmacy run and found Brooke carrying his old tackle box toward her car. "What are you doing?" I asked. She hugged it to her chest. "Dad said I could have this." "When?" "A while ago." "Then leave it here until we make a list." She rolled her eyes. "Why do you have to make everything a transaction?" "Because he's alive, Brooke. You don't get to start dividing his things while he's still in the house." Her face changed immediately. She looked wounded, which was her most effective expression. "Dad and I have a different bond. You wouldn't understand. A different bond does not mean different rules." Mom came out onto the porch before Brooke could answer. "Ashley, not today." That phrase had ended a lot of conversations in our family. Not today meant not in front of Brooke. Not today meant not while Mom was tired. Not today meant never, if they could stretch it long enough. Brooke put the tackle box in her trunk. After Dad died, things got worse quickly. The funeral was small. Mom cried in a way that made everyone want to protect her. Brooke stayed at her side and accepted hugs as though she had lost him alone. I handled the funeral home's missing paperwork, confirmed the insurance assignment, found Dad's military-style keepsake pin for the display, and paid the balance when Mom's card was declined. I did not announce any of that. 3 days later, I went to Dad's house to pick up copies of his medical records and found empty spaces on the shelves. His watch was gone. So was the framed photograph of him and his father at a lake, the old pocket knife he kept in a desk drawer, a small locked cash box, and a stack of handwritten recipe cards from his mother. The tackle box was missing too, though that was not a surprise. Brooke was in the hallway carrying a plastic grocery bag that clinked when she moved. "What's in the bag?" I asked. "Kitchen stuff." "What kitchen stuff?" She exhaled hard. "Do you need an inventory of every spoon?" "Actually, yes. We're supposed to inventory personal property. Dad would have wanted me to have these things." "You've said that about everything you've taken." Mom stepped between us. "Stop interrogating your sister. I'm asking what left the house. And I'm asking you to show some compassion." That afternoon I started my own list. Watch. Tackle box. Keepsake pin. Framed lake photo. Pocket knife. Locked cash box. Recipe cards. I added dates, who had been in the house, and what I remembered seeing last. Felt ugly. I hated doing it. But I had already learned that anything not written down could be rearranged later. A few days after the funeral, my cousin Paige sent me a private message. "I'm not trying to start anything," she wrote, "but that is not what your mom told us." I asked, "What did she tell you?" The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. "She said you barely visited your dad. She said Brooke was the one there all the time, and you only started asking questions when money came up." I read that message while sitting in my car outside a pharmacy. Dad's last refill receipt was still in the cup holder. I wrote, "That's interesting. My bank app says I was at the hospital twice during the week she said I disappeared." Paige called me a minute later. "I don't want to pick sides," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I just thought you should know." "Who else did she tell?" There was a long pause. "Ray. Aunt Denise. Probably more people." I thanked her and ended the call. Then I sat there looking through my bank statements. Parking garage charges. Pharmacy charges. A transfer marked home care supplies. Another marked utility catch-up. The hospital balance. The property tax payment I made after finding a red notice folded inside Dad's kitchen drawer. I had dates. I had receipts. I had call logs showing 16 calls with Dad's doctors in 1 month. I had text messages from Mom asking for help and telling me not to tell Brooke. And I had said nothing while she told everyone I barely visited. That was my mistake. A week later, Mom asked me to help move some of Dad's boxes into a storage unit because she said the house was too painful to look at. Brooke was supposed to help but canceled because she had a migraine. I found a storage receipt tucked into an old tax folder. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, were the words, "Ashley copy blue folder. Don't let them argue later." I stared at it until Mom asked what I was doing. "Nothing," I said and slipped it into my pocket. Dad had mentioned a letter once, about 2 months before he died. He was sitting at the kitchen table, pushing a pen between his fingers while I sorted insurance forms. "I put some things in writing," he said. "What things?" "Who gets what?" "A few accounts. Personal stuff." "Is it with your will?" "Some of it. I made copies." Then he gave me a tired smile. "Something for you so they don't argue later." I told him nobody was going to fight. He looked at me for a moment and said, "You always think people will act better than they do." At the time, I assumed the letter was with his formal documents. After he died, Mom said there was no letter. She said Dad had been confused near the end and probably imagined it. The note on the storage receipt told me otherwise. I searched the boxes until I found a blue folder wedged beneath old homeowners' insurance policies. Inside was a plain envelope with my name on it. The letter was not dramatic. Dad did not accuse anyone of anything. He wrote the way he talked. Short sentences, crooked lines, no wasted emotion. He wrote that I had handled the hard and boring parts of his illness, and that he did not want anyone saying I had been absent. He listed several personal items he wanted me to receive, including his watch, the lake photograph, his recipe cards, and a small box of keepsakes. He also referenced a modest savings account and said he wanted a defined portion to go to me because I had paid expenses he did not want me carrying alone. His signature had been witnessed and notarized months earlier. The page was stamped as a copy. It was not a replacement for his will, and I knew that. But it was proof that the conversation had happened, and that Mom had lied when she said there was no letter. At the bottom Dad had written, "Carol knows where the original is." I read that line 3 times. Mom knew. She had looked me in the face and said the letter did not exist. I made copies of everything in the blue folder. I scanned the letter, the note, and the storage receipt. I did not confront her. Not yet. 2 days later, I received a document packet by email from an estate paperwork handler. Mom had told them I wanted everything handled quickly and had agreed in principle to waive certain claims. I had agreed to nothing. The packet was full of language that sounded harmless if you skimmed it. Family settlement. Voluntary release. Efficient administration. Mutual understanding. Buried in the middle was a waiver stating that I gave up any claim to a portion of the estate, certain personal property, and any objection to prior handling of Dad's accounts. Then I saw a reference to an earlier acknowledgement form. A scanned copy was attached. My initials appeared at the bottom of one page. They looked almost right. The A was too narrow. The second letter leaned the wrong way. I usually connected both letters with one stroke. These were separate. The spacing around my middle initial was off too. I had no memory of seeing that page. There was no date beside the initials and no witness line completed. I did not immediately call anyone and accuse them of forgery. I knew what that would become. Mom would cry. Brooke would say I was paranoid. Ray would tell me grief was making me suspicious. I did not have to prove the initials were fake in that moment. I only had to stop pretending they were normal. So I started organizing. I created a timeline beginning 6 months before Dad died. I added hospital visits, calls, payments, pharmacy pickups, home care deliveries, and the dates Mom asked me to keep things from Brooke. I saved screenshots of every relevant text message. I downloaded bank confirmations and highlighted descriptions such as hospital balance, home care supplies, and property tax. I exported one voicemail from Mom and had it transcribed. "Ashley, you saved us with that payment. I mean it. Just don't bring it up around Brooke because she's already upset about everything." I added the list of missing property. I also reviewed Dad's account activity using the statements included in the estate packet. There were 3 transfers totaling $4,600 to Brooke in the days surrounding his death. One was dated 2 days after he died. The memo lines were blank. I did not know whether she had permission to make the earlier transfers. I did know the later one needed an explanation. Then I prepared a certified letter requesting that the estate not proceed until the disputed initials, missing property, and account activity were reviewed. I did not send copies to relatives. I did not post anything online. I put everything in a sealed envelope labeled for estate file review. I kept the certified mail receipt and tracking number in my car console. The next evening Mom called. "Can you come in Friday morning?" she asked. "For what?" "Just a quick family formality. Signatures, paperwork, then everyone can move on." "What exactly am I signing?" "You already got the packet." "I got a packet that says I agreed to waive claims." "I did not agree to that." She went quiet for half a second. "It's standard." "Then it shouldn't be a problem for me to read it." Her voice tightened. "Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Then don't ask me to sign something I haven't reviewed." She sighed loudly, as if I had confirmed every bad thing she had ever said about me. "Ray will be there. He understands what your father wanted." That told me why Ray had been invited. He was not there as a neutral witness. He was there to make the pressure look reasonable. I put the sealed envelope in my bag. The attorney's office was on the 2nd floor of a low brick building. The reception area had beige chairs, clipboards lined up on the counter, and coffee in a paper cup that had gone cold by the time I arrived. A notary stamp sat behind the receptionist beside a stack of blue folders. Ray was already there. He stood when he saw me and gave me a careful hug. "Let's just get through this," he said. "Good morning to you too." He looked embarrassed. "You know what I mean." Brooke sat beside Mom in the small conference room. She had a bottle of water in front of her and both hands wrapped around it as though she needed support just to be near me. Mom had arranged the papers in a neat stack. I sat across from them. The paperwork handler introduced herself, explained that she was there to document signatures and route the documents to the attorney handling the estate, and then asked if everyone had reviewed the packet. I have, I said. Mom pushed a pen across the table. Then sign. I did not touch it. I want to go through the waiver first. Brooke closed her eyes. Please don't turn Dad's death into another performance. I looked at her. Reading a legal document is a performance now? You always need to prove you're smarter than everyone. I need to know what I'm signing. Mom leaned forward and lowered her voice, but not enough to keep the others from hearing. I am trying to keep this family from falling apart. By asking me to waive my share? By asking you to accept what is fair. What makes this fair? Her mouth tightened. You already got enough attention when he was sick. Don't use his death to center yourself again. The room went completely still. Even Brooke looked at her for a second. Then Brooke recovered. You weren't there emotionally, she said. You showed up with receipts and questions. Dad needed love. I felt heat rise into my face, but I kept my hands flat on the table. The record is going to be a problem for that sentence. Ray shifted in his chair. Ashley, can't you just sign and let everyone move on? I thought this was already agreed on. By whom? Your mother said. My mother says a lot of things. Mom's expression changed. The grieving, patient mother disappeared for a moment. Sign away your share and stop pretending you matter to him. She said it quietly, but every person at that table heard her. Brooke gave the smallest smile. Not a grin. Not something anyone else would notice unless they were watching for it. I was watching. I turned back to the paperwork and pointed to the acknowledgement page. Who provided this scan? The handler leaned closer. It was included with the family documents. By whom? Mom answered before she could. It was in your father's files. I never signed it. Brooke's smile vanished. Mom shook her head. You initialed it months ago. Where? At the house. Who was there? I don't remember every detail of every day. These initials do not look right. Ray leaned over. They look like yours. They look close to mine. Brooke threw her hands up. Oh my God. Now we're doing a forgery accusation. I did not use that word. You're implying it. I'm saying I want verification. Mom stared at me. Do you know how cruel this looks? I met her eyes. Are you asking me to sign this because it's fair? Or because you need me quiet? There you go again, she snapped. Making everything ugly. No. I'm done making your version easier. I stood. The paperwork handler said, Miss Ashley, before you leave, I need to confirm that you are declining to sign today. I am declining to sign any document that waives my rights or relies on initials I dispute. I took the sealed envelope from my bag and carried it to the reception desk. This contains information relevant to the estate file, I said. There's also a certified written request for review. The receptionist looked toward the conference room, then back at me. I'll mark the date and time received. Thank you. Mom came out behind me. Ashley, don't you dare walk out. I turned once. You wanted paperwork. You got paperwork. She followed me into the parking lot. The air was cold enough that I could see her breath. I unlocked my car, but she stepped between me and the door. You are punishing your grieving mother. I'm not discussing this beside my car. You have no idea what I've been through. I know what you asked me to pay. I know what you told people afterward. Her face went pale. You're going to embarrass this family over money? I'm asking for the file to be accurate. Your father would hate seeing you act like this. Dad left a letter. She stopped. It was not a dramatic reaction. She did not gasp. She just went still. That was enough. I opened the car door. She grabbed the edge of it. What letter? The one you said did not exist. Ashley, I'm not doing this in a parking lot. I got in and closed the door. By the time I reached the first stoplight, I had 4 missed calls. At home, I put my phone face down and made toast because I had forgotten to eat. Mom called 9 more times. Brooke sent 6 texts. The first said, Congratulations. You ruined Dad's last chance at peace. The second said, This was never about Dad. It was about money. I replied once. Then explain why you needed my signature before anyone saw Dad's letter. She did not answer for 17 minutes. Then she wrote, "Why are you showing private things like some kind of lawyer?" I left that one unanswered. Ray called next. "This is getting out of hand," he said. "It was out of hand when my initials appeared on a document I did not sign. I'm sure there's an explanation. Then the review should be easy. A court battle will eat up the estate." I did not file a lawsuit. I requested verification and inventory. He let out a long breath. "Your mother is hysterical. That does not make the paperwork accurate. You could come back tomorrow and sign a revised version." "No. Ashley, all estate communication needs to be in writing from now on. You're talking to me like I'm opposing counsel. I'm talking to you like someone who repeated Mom's version before asking me what happened." He went silent. I said, "Good night, Ray," and ended the call. The next morning, the estate handler emailed all three of us. Distribution and further processing would be temporarily paused pending review of the disputed acknowledgement, the personal property inventory, and account activity. No one was to remove additional property from Dad's house. Any items already removed had to be disclosed. Future substantive communication was to be in writing. For once, Mom's tone did not matter. The file did. Her response arrived 11 minutes later. "This delay is unnecessary and emotionally harmful." The handler replied, "The review is required because a beneficiary disputes a signature and has submitted supporting documentation concerning estate property and account handling." Brooke responded to everyone, "Ashley is lying because she resents my relationship with Dad." The handler wrote, "Please limit communications to facts relevant to the estate." I read that line 3 times and almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because someone had finally told Brooke that her feelings were not evidence. Over the next week, the family divided itself into predictable groups. Aunt Denise left me a voicemail saying, "Couldn't this have been handled privately?" I texted back, "I tried private. Private is where they edited me out." Another relative said the timing was inappropriate. I did not ask what timing would have been appropriate for challenging a waiver before signing it. Paige called and apologized. "I should have asked you sooner," she said. "You didn't owe me an investigation." "No, but I believed the easier story. That's what it was designed for." She told me Mom had said Brooke spent every day with Dad and I appeared only when bills or accounts came up. I sent Paige 2 screenshots. One showed Mom asking me to pay the home care balance. The other showed her asking me not to tell Brooke. Paige called back almost immediately. "This is a lot different than what we were told." Exactly. I still did not send her the whole file. I was not trying to win relatives one by one. I just wanted her to understand why I had stopped discussing the estate by phone. The review meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. It took place in a smaller conference room at the same office. There were bottled waters, yellow legal pads, and a box of tissues placed directly in front of Mom and Brooke, which felt almost like assigned seating. The estate handler was there. So was a representative from the attorney's office. Ray attended because Mom had identified him as someone familiar with Dad's wishes. Paige was there because she had helped at the house after the funeral and could confirm who removed certain items. Mom wore black and held a folded tissue in one hand. Brooke looked like she had been crying before anyone arrived. I brought one paper copy of my timeline and the original certified mail receipt. The office already had the evidence from my envelope. The attorney's representative began by explaining that the meeting was not a trial and no finding of forgery had been made. The purpose was to identify disputed documents, missing property, and account activity before administration continued. Mom interrupted almost immediately. "My daughter has decided to punish me during the worst period of my life." The representative looked at her. "We'll give everyone time to speak. I need it noted that I tried to settle this peacefully." I said nothing. Brooke stared at me across the table. "You're enjoying this?" "No. You always wanted Dad to choose you." "I wanted his records handled honestly." "He loved me more and you can't stand it." Ray looked down at his legal pad. The attorney's representative asked me to explain why I disputed the waiver. I opened my timeline. I was invited to sign what Mom called a family formality, The document would have waived part of my share, my claim to specific personal property, and objections to prior account handling. It referenced an acknowledgement page with initials I do not recognize as mine. I asked for verification. Mom shook her head. She signed it. Where? I asked. At the house. When? Months ago. Who witnessed it? You expect me to remember every person who walked through that house? The representative asked. Was the page notarized? No, Mom said. Was it witnessed? I don't know. Do you have the original? Mom looked toward Brooke. Brooke said, why does the original matter if the scan exists? The representative answered, because the signature is disputed. Brooke leaned back and crossed her arms. I continued. The waiver packet also omitted Dad's handwritten letter and did not include a complete personal property inventory. Mom's eyes filled with tears. That letter was not legally binding. I did not say it replaced the will. You're waving it around like your father wrote you a crown. I submitted it because you told the family it did not exist. She looked at Ray. I said Robert was confused. The attorney's representative slid a copy of the letter onto the table. The letter was signed, witnessed, and notarized before the period described in the medical records as his most serious decline. Mom's mouth tightened. That does not make every word accurate. I looked at her. Which part is inaccurate? The part where he said I handled appointments, the part where he listed the expenses, or the part where he wrote that you knew where the original was? Brooke spoke over her. This is disgusting. You're exposing private things. You made it public when you made me the villain, I said. I'm making it accurate. I read through the timeline without dramatizing it. March 6th. Mom asked me to pay the home care supply balance. March 8th. Payment confirmation for $684. March 21st. Hospital parking charge and medication copay. April 2nd. Property tax notice found in Dad's kitchen drawer. April 3rd. Payment confirmation. April 17th. Mom's voicemail thanking me and asking me not to mention the payment to Brooke. May 4th. 2 calls with Dad's insurance company totaling 47 minutes. May 11th. Pharmacy receipt for wound supplies and compression socks. I did not read every line. I read enough. Then I placed the printed call log and bank statements beside the timeline. The claim that I barely visited is false. The claim that I became involved only after Dad died is false. These records existed before there was an estate dispute. Paige cleared her throat. Carol told me Ashley barely visited, she said. She made it sound like Brooke was doing everything. Mom turned toward her. I was grieving. This was before Robert died, Paige said quietly. Mom looked away. Ray picked up the voicemail transcript. Is this your voice? He asked Mom. She did not answer. Carol. Yes, but it was a private conversation. Did Ashley make the payment? That is not the point. Ray put the paper down. Is any of this fake? Mom's face hardened. You're supposed to be helping me. I'm asking a question. She is using fragments to create a story. Ray looked at the bank confirmations, the texts, and the letter. Is any of it fake? Mom stared at the table. Brooke jumped in. Mom was under pressure. Ashley always makes people prove they deserve basic kindness. I almost responded, but the attorney's representative spoke first. We are not evaluating kindness. We are evaluating records. Brooke looked at the paperwork as though it had personally betrayed her. The representative moved to the missing property list. Ms. Brooke, did you remove any personal items from the house before inventory? She wiped under one eye. Dad gave me things. Which items? I don't remember every little thing. The list includes a watch, tackle box, keepsake pin, framed photograph, pocket knife, locked cash box, and handwritten recipe cards. Brooke glanced at Mom. The tackle box was mine. Was that documented? Dad told me. When? I don't know. Last year. Paige spoke carefully. I saw Brooke load the framed photo and the cash box into her car after the funeral. Brooke turned on her. You said you weren't picking sides. I'm answering what I saw. It was a family house. I wasn't stealing. No one used that word, the representative said. But any property removed before inventory has to be disclosed and may need to be returned. Brooke's voice rose. Dad wanted me to have sentimental things. I said. His letter says he wanted me to have the watch, photograph, and recipe cards. She looked at me with open hatred. You already got everything. You got to be the responsible one. You got all the praise for fixing things. I actually laughed once quietly. What praise? Mom said. Do not mock your sister. I paid bills you told me to hide, and then you told the family I abandoned Dad. Brooke carried objects out of the house and posted about holding everyone together. Please tell me where the praise was. Brooke began crying harder. The representative waited until she settled, then asked about the transfers from Dad's checking account. Brooke wiped her face. What transfers? One for $1,500, one for $1,300, and one for $1,800. I bought things for him. Please provide receipts. I don't keep every receipt. The final transfer occurred 2 days after his death. Brooke froze. Mom said. That was reimbursement. For what? The representative asked. Funeral expenses. I looked at the statement. I paid the funeral home balance. Mom snapped. Not everything needs to be documented, Ashley. The representative folded her hands. In this process it does. Ray leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then he asked Mom, why were you asking Ashley to waive objections before these transfers were explained? Mom's voice went flat. Because I wanted peace. No, I said. You wanted closure without review. She pointed at me. You have always been cold. I was calm because every time I got emotional, you used it to dismiss me. That's not true. It is why you invited Ray. You wanted a room full of people watching me refuse, so you could say I was difficult. Ray looked at her. Did you tell me Ashley had already agreed? Mom did not answer. Carol. I said she understood what Robert wanted. That is not what you told me. Mom pressed the tissue to her mouth. For the first time, Brooke did not jump in quickly enough to save her. The attorney's representative summarized the next steps. No distribution would proceed until the disputed initials were reviewed, and the source document was verified. A new inventory of Dad's personal property would be completed. Items removed before inventory had to be returned or formally disclosed. The transfers to Brooke had to be supported by receipts or accounted for in the estate. All substantive communication would remain in writing. The handwritten letter would be included in the record and considered alongside the will and other estate documents. It would not automatically control everything, but it could not simply be hidden because one person disliked what it said. Mom stared straight ahead. Brooke asked, how long is Ashley going to drag this out? The representative said, the duration depends on how quickly everyone provides complete records. That was the moment the balance shifted. Until then, Mom and Brooke had treated the estate like a family story they could narrate. Mom decided what counted. Brooke decided what Dad would have wanted. Ray and everyone else were expected to accept the version delivered in the saddest voice. Now there was a file. There were dates. There were missing items. There were transfers. There were initials that could not be waved away as a misunderstanding. After the meeting, Ray caught up with me in the hallway. I owe you an apology, he said. You believed what was easiest. He nodded slowly. I did. I'm not asking you to choose me over Mom. I know. I'm asking you not to call me difficult when I refused to sign something I didn't agree to. He rubbed the back of his neck. I shouldn't have told you to sign. No, you shouldn't have. He accepted that without defending himself. Paige hugged me near the elevator. I understand now why you stayed quiet, she said. I thought staying quiet made me better than the conflict. And now I think it made the lies cheaper. Mom and Brooke passed us without speaking. The weeks that followed were not a clean victory. Some relatives apologized. Others doubled down. Aunt Denise told me I had humiliated my mother. I asked, did she tell you she hid Dad's letter? That is between you and her. She made my supposed absence everyone's business. You still could have been gentler. I stopped answering after that. Gentler in my family usually meant less accurate. The document review did not produce a dramatic announcement that someone had forged my initials. The original page was never produced. The scan had no completed witness section and could not be reliably authenticated. Because I disputed it and had not signed the later waiver, it was not used as consent to move forward. That was enough. I had never needed a courtroom confession. I needed my name removed from a document I did not recognize. Brooke returned the missing items in a large plastic storage bin. She left it at the estate office rather than bringing it to me. Inside were Dad's watch, the lake photograph, his pocket knife, the recipe cards, and the keepsake pin. The tackle box was returned later after the inventory appointment. The cash box came back unlocked and empty. Brooke said it had always been empty. Nobody could prove otherwise, so the record simply reflected that it had been returned without contents. She eventually produced receipts for some of the money she claimed was reimbursement. Not all of it. The unsupported amount was charged against what she would otherwise receive from the estate. She called that theft. The estate representative called it accounting. Mom never gave me the apology I wanted. She did, however, admit to Ray that I had paid several of Dad's expenses. Ray told me because Mom still refused to say it directly to me. A month after the review meeting, she sent me an email. "I wish you had trusted me enough to handle this as a family." I replied, "I did handle it as a family for years. That is why there was no record anyone had to respect." She wrote back, "You are determined to see the worst in me." I did not respond. I set 5 boundaries and kept them. I would not sign anything without reading and verifying it. I would not pay another expense for Mom or Brooke. I would not discuss estate matters by phone. Every item and account had to be inventoried transparently. And if Mom or Brooke continued telling relatives I showed up only for money, I would send those relatives the timeline they had forced me to build. The first boundary was easy. The second was harder. 2 months later, Mom texted that she was short on a property payment and needed help just this once. I replied, "I'm not covering expenses anymore." She called immediately. I did not answer. She sent, "Call me now." I wrote, "No. Put it in writing." She never did. That small exchange affected me more than the estate meeting. For years, her panic had automatically become my emergency. If she was overwhelmed, I solved it. If Brooke was upset, I softened the facts. If a relative misunderstood me, I stayed quiet so Mom would not be embarrassed. This time, the phone rang and nothing in me moved toward it. The estate was eventually allowed to proceed under the original will, with the disputed waiver excluded. The personal property listed in Dad's letter was handled according to his written wishes through an agreed inventory. The supported expenses I had paid were documented. The unexplained portion of Brooke's transfers was accounted for against her distribution. Nobody became rich. That had never been the point. Dad's estate was a house with years of deferred maintenance, ordinary accounts, tools, furniture, old photographs, and the small savings of a man who worried about every bill. The emotional value was larger than the dollar amount, which was exactly why Mom and Brooke assumed they could call me greedy and end the conversation. I received Dad's watch, the lake photograph, the recipe cards, and the small box of keepsakes he had mentioned. The box contained ticket stubs, an old compass, 2 letters from his father, and a hospital parking receipt with my handwriting on the back. I had written, "Ask doctor about swelling. Pick up socks. Call insurance." It was such a boring little list. I sat on the floor with the box beside me and cried harder over that receipt than I had at the funeral. Not because it proved anything. By then I had enough proof. I cried because that was what loving Dad had looked like near the end. Not speeches. Not photographs. A reminder scribbled on the back of a parking receipt because he needed 3 things and I was afraid I would forget one. Brooke and I do not have much of a relationship now. She says I turned grief into a legal case. I say she turned Dad's belongings into a private shopping trip. Mom still describes the estate conflict as something that happened to her. She has never acknowledged that she created the signing meeting, hid the letter, or told relatives I was absent while accepting my money. But she no longer controls the whole story. Ray stopped repeating her version. Paige corrected 2 relatives in front of me without being asked. The estate file contains Dad's letter, my payment records, the inventory, and the disputed waiver review. That matters more to me than an apology designed to end an uncomfortable conversation. I stayed quiet too long. That part belongs to me. I thought silence was proof that I was not petty. In reality, it gave Mom room to turn private help into public greed, and gave Brooke room to confuse being protected with being right. Leaving that pen untouched was the first honest thing I had done for myself in years. I didn't fight for the money. I fought because they tried to make my father's last chapter another story where I disappeared. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.